Welcome back to today's episode of Science and Spirituality, as we continue our conversation with Taylor Schmitz, a University of Toronto, Canada PhD student in the Department of Psychology, who is the lead author of a recently published study in the respected Journal of Neuroscience. He and his team members examined how our emotional states, specifically positive, neutral, and negative states, impact the brain's visual cortex's ability to perceive the world. The scientists concluded that having a constructive frame of mind allows one to take in more information when one views the world around them, whereas those in a negative state have tunnel vision, or a lesser ability to do the same. How do these findings apply in the real world?
In a negative state, where you're more fixated on a narrow area of your visual field, it leaves you less able to integrate other pieces of information in your visual world. And so this is something that can also have negative effects. For instance, if you were navigating through a crowd looking for somebody, that could be an example of where you would want to have more access to the full extent of your visual field.
The results indicate that it is advantageous for us to have a constructive mindset whenever possible, as then we are able to visually take in more of our world. But what if we have a negative mindset? Is it possible to change our thinking and then experience a positive state of mind? Taylor says a method called reappraisal may be the way for us to get back on the positive side.
What we're kind of showing is that the brain facilitates this narrowness, and that's something that really requires a reappraisal of the negative state itself to get out of. So if you're in a negative state, sometimes you just need to force yourself to get into slightly more positive mode of thinking so that you can access other pieces of information that may contextualize that negative event, whether it's the loss of a loved one or just, spilling coffee on yourself. Something that could be, negative, you could just quickly try to get into a slightly more positive mood and think, well, hey, I've spilled coffee on myself before and it's no big deal. Or, I've lost a loved one, but I have this entire family network that I can rely on for support, and that, and using bits of information like this are things that require flexible thinking, that require different perspective taking. And unfortunately, negative moods are not conducive to that mode of information processing.
Taylor Schmitz is now repeating the experiment with an older population, namely with those who are 70 to 75 years of age.
We're in the midst of collecting data to do this. And one of the interesting findings that's come out of research on older individuals and just emotion across the age spectrum is that older individuals are consistently rate themselves as having more positive affect than younger adults. So in terms of their sort of ratings, subjective ratings of self-satisfaction, they seem to be consistently higher than young adults. Initially, I think we are hypothesizing that because older adults seem to have this positivity bias, so they seem to be just generally more positive, is that they actually might be slightly more impervious to the influences of negative emotion. So it could either mean, A, they're just happier, but negative emotions influence them just as much as they do young adults. Or it could mean that they're just as happy as young adults, but they're more impervious to the influences of negative information. And maybe that's just because of the age, they have just more experience with positive and negative experiences in their life. And so they know how to deal with negative.
We asked Taylor how the research findings can be applied on a global level.
Again, if you were, at the geopolitical scale, I think the bias in terms of media, for sure, is on kind of negative portrayals, because they attract audiences, and I think that it's easier to portray negative information than it is to portray positive information. It's easier to criticize than it is to applaud somebody. And so this bias, this negativity bias in the media, I think leads to very, very narrow and circumscribed perspectives on entire societies and cultures. The conflict in the Middle East is portrayed as very one-sided, perspectives on either side of the conflict. Each side has this very narrow perception of the other, even though there are these incredibly rich cultures that have inhabited this area for thousands of years, and have both contributed so much to science and technology, and are these rich cultures, and none of that is appreciated. This is something that I think the more appreciation we could have for these cultures as beautiful cultures in and of themselves, that we could probably start influencing the way we make some political decisions about how to interact with one another.
We appreciate Taylor Schmitz and colleagues for sharing this important research which demonstrates the power of our thoughts to influence how we see the world around us. Our gratitude goes to Taylor Schmitz in particular for introducing us to this study. Thank you, esteemed viewers, for joining us for today's episode of Science and Spirituality. Coming up next is Words of Wisdom, after noteworthy news. May we all live in peace and happiness together.
For more details, please visit www.suprememastertv.com/SS